Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Tippie College's webinar on using artificial intelligence in your job search. My name is Adam McLaughlin, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at the Tippie College of Business. It's my great pleasure to coordinate today's session and to be here with you all. Before we jump into today's main topic, I'd like to highlight two upcoming webinars as we continue our series into the spring. The first webinar, Negotiation Skills, Strategies for Success, will take place on Wednesday, March 5th at noon. Our expert speaker will share key insights to help you build and refine your negotiation skills, covering fundamental techniques that every successful negotiator should know. You'll learn practical strategies you can apply to negotiate with confidence and achieve better outcomes. Our next webinar, Open for Business, Launching and Growing Your Startup, will take place on Wednesday, April 16th at noon. This is the fourth installment of our entrepreneurial series, focusing on the challenges of starting, expanding, and eventually selling or closing a business. Join our panel of experienced entrepreneurs as they share their insights from their own journeys, offering valuable lessons, practical advice for anyone looking to build or grow a successful venture. I will drop the registration links for those future webinars here in the chat shortly. Another item to note is that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on the Tippie College Alumni Resources page and on our YouTube channel. Past webinar recordings are also available there, all of which are free and open to the public, so please feel free to share this information with others. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic, using artificial intelligence in your job search. Our featured speakers are Amy Bartachek, Managing Director of Tippie Graduate Career Services, Emily Campion, Assistant Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship at Tippie, and Ellie Evans, Talent Experience and Recruiting Manager at First MainStreet Insurance. They will share insights on how AI is shaping the job search process, from commonly used programs to the way recruiters are leveraging these tools. We will have time for questions at the end of our discussion. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and feel free to use the chat to communicate with us. And with all that, I will now hand things over to Emily. Take it away, Emily.
Thanks, Adam. Your intros are so nice. That was so polished. And then I follow up. I'm really excited to talk to everybody about this topic. I spent a lot of time in it. I'll mention that in a second. But I think we can probably all agree that artificial intelligence has been one of the most disruptive technological advancements in modern times. From when it concerned organizations and applicants, as you can see from some of these headlines, it now excites us and energizes us to think about all the different ways that we can use it. So myself, I've been working in this space for about 10 years. It started from me having data I needed to analyze that I didn't have a way to analyze. It was text data, and machine learning does that better than humans in a lot of ways. And so we used it as this way to solve a massive problem, and we've just been running with it since. And so I've been really sort of privy to the sentiment shift over time. And while in the beginning, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, people I talked to said, "Oh no, we're not there. We don't understand it," which is a fair response. We don't understand it. We don't trust it, is now exciting a lot of people. So I'm glad to see so many people here who are excited to learn more about how it can help you. There are limitations, of course, and we will talk about those. But my job is, I think, the hype person in this group. So how do these work? And I only touch on this because I think we all sort of feel like we understand this, but I do want to reinforce it. So it's doing what our brains do. In fact, it's sort of ground truth as an entire sort of area is to sort of replicate what our brains do, because our brains are incredibly powerful. So what it's doing at a very high level is finding patterns and then using those patterns to try and predict behavior. That's not so scary. And it's especially not scary when we think about using it in Spotify now. I admittedly am someone who I love pop and punk. Blink-182 is my favorite band. You can judge me as much as you want, but you will not see Blink-182 on my Spotify because my husband, bless him, has recently gotten into folk music. So my entire Spotify is folk music. Now I'm not super mad about it because I'm learning to love it like he does, but it's recommending Billy Strings and Tyler Childers and Old Crow. Gone are my Blink-182 and Bright Eyes albums and my podcast that I love. And that's fine, but that tells us how this works. all it's doing is looking at your behavior and trying to predict how you're going to behave in the future. And so knowing that, maybe we can better understand how it's being used in organizations. So a lot of my work is not actually from the job search perspective. I'm hoping to pivot into that at some point, but I find organizations are so hungry for ways to score candidate data. And what that means is we as candidates, when we're applying, we develop so much text data. Think about our resumes, cover letters, letters of reference, maybe statements of purpose or objectives, you name it. We create so much text data. Our interviews, maybe if you used companies like HireVue or previously Modern Hire, which was acquired by HireVue, where they transcribe your interview responses into text data. It's notoriously very difficult to score fairly and systematically by humans. So we delegate this to algorithms and we train those algorithms. So if you see this picture in front of you, on the right is your current team of high-performing mechanical engineers and their skills. I decided an abacus was good enough representation of skills. So this is what a high-performing team looks like, and you need to select into it. So on the left, you're going to train your algorithm to select the people in your applicant pool that look like your high-performing team already. I know that at least 20 of you, how many are there in here? 180. I know that there are at least 50 of you who are like, but I have a question, and that's fine. Just bear with us and you'll be able to ask that question. But in general, what it's doing is it's saying, tell me what your productive members look like of your team, and I'm going to try and find those in this application. Now, this should bring a little bit of comfort to you to think, well, if I don't have the skills, maybe I don't belong there. That's also true, but it should provide you a little bit of empowerment to say, oh, if it's just a matter of making sure that I'm clarifying, communicating my knowledge, skills, and abilities well, that's totally within your power. And Amy's going to talk about that a little bit more here in a few minutes. And so if we take this basic understanding of it's just trying to find the right people for the job without hopefully completely automating the entire process, but that's maybe another webinar. I think it becomes a little bit less daunting to know that a lot of it is still within our control. And that's what this webinar is really about. So as candidates, like I mentioned, we develop resumes, cover letters, and interview prep. Amy's going to go into a lot more detail on this, but I'm sure many of you have already dabbled in using, this is ChatGPT, FYI, we're going to be talking more about Co-Pilot. I'm sure many of you have dabbled in this, but it can help you build out your resume and cover letter, and it can help be a coach. And that's really important because interview coaching can be really expensive and prohibitive for a lot of people, but we can use ChatGPT to help us curate our answers, not totally do it for us, but curate our answers. So let's think about matching our resume to a job description. On the left is a job description that at least was open a couple weeks ago here at Iowa for, I want to say it was an administrative services position. So you have this description on the left, review and answer routine inquiries. Okay, so our resume, hopefully, will reflect something that looks like that bullet. Now, we don't want to lie, but we want to reflect in our resume how we match onto that, because they're probably using this job description to train their model in some way. And so we want our resume to reflect that. So the first you can see here, responded to inquiries from internal and external stakeholders, providing accurate information, etc. Now, this feels very broad, and it is because I had ChatGPT do it, and then I did the thing you're not supposed to do, which is copy and paste. But I actually have no skill on the thing on the left, so I couldn't make it more specific. But you should then take what's said on the right directly from ChatGPT and say, okay, how can I tweak this to reflect exactly my skill, my experiences? So AI can influence this in a lot of ways. I talk to my undergrads about this all the time. And actually, I will say my undergrads are pretty good about just saying, I'm just going to use this and see what happens. We then have to help guide them a bit, but otherwise they're very excited about it. So it can quicken these time-consuming processes. Efficiency is probably one of the biggest marketable pieces of using AI. It just creates ways of doing things faster, and we sort of like that. It also can help, like I said, about interview coaching. It can help us better position ourselves. What knowledge, skills, and abilities do we have that maybe we don't know how to talk about them, or don't know maybe where they came from? Often I find my undergraduate students don't always feel like they can use things from outside of work, like their experiences at church or in a community center. Those are still very important and help you learn knowledge, skills, and abilities related to the job. And so how can you position some of those things, even though maybe they weren't paid, because that's still part of who you are and what you can offer to a job. And then finally, it can be a career counselor, helping us identify, okay, that's where I want to go. How do I get there? Historically, that meant I have to go find someone who has my dream job and ask him how they got there and then try and follow that best I can. Now we can use ChatGPT to help us come up with different ways of actually getting there. But just because it's really efficient, and Ellie will help us understand this a little bit more, we can't rely on it totally. And firstly, that's because we can tell, right? We've all gotten emails where we're like, they didn't write that exactly. Like, that's a problem. We don't like that. We still want to be communicated as humans. Maybe there will be some point, and even in my lifetime, that we aren't bothered by that. But for now, we are, and we're trying to get a job. So we still need to ensure that we're showing effort and we're showing up for the organization that we're applying to. It's not supposed to replace your effort. It's supposed to enhance your effort. Again, that if you don't know what that means yet, that's totally okay. And Amy's going to tell us how to do that. It should speak to who you are and what you can do for that company and how you're looking to fill that role. Again, not replacing necessarily your own language, but helping you brainstorm a little bit. You must humanize. So we're going to highlight 2 tools before I hand it off to Amy. I know that right now you guys are reading these and some of you are going, yeah, but those aren't good. Or I prefer Gemini, or I prefer Claude. Yes, totally. That's fair. I prefer ChatGPT at present. It's one of the best performing models because it's one of the largest models, but you get to have your own preference and that's totally okay. So ChatGPT is often seen as something that's better for brainstorming. I really love it for using structure to create a lesson plan or to create a presentation. My go-to for all of this is, regardless, I'm assuming they're taking my data. I like to just operate from that because then I don't make any silly mistakes and I don't have to monitor what I put in there. I already know not to put, names or anything. I never input anything from class. I follow all the laws, I promise. And so knowing that, that's how I operate. I operate the same with Co-Pilot. Co-Pilot's a little different. If you've got Microsoft 365, for example, you have access to what's supposed to be an enterprise version of Co-Pilot where you shouldn't have any data privacy concerns. And I know there are potentially people in the room already saying, yeah, we don't have to worry about this. I, again, would just assume that people are taking my data. So I don't use it with things that are where I'm totally giving identifiable information. The caveat being, I haven't updated my resume in a while. But next time I do, I would potentially use ChatGPT. I just maybe take the identifying information out and maybe my school and things like that to use it. But even that, maybe I don't really care. Anyway, that's my litmus test. Would I care if someone saw this? No, because my CV is already online. Like that's, for me, that's the test. You'll have to come up with your own. Copilot's really good for task management and grammar and flow because it's integrated into Microsoft Suite. But Copilot is also very good with general tasks. I know I've talked about, ChatGPT being the main one for that, but actually Copilot is very capable and its engine is actually GPT-4o, I believe. And so the benefit it offers is that it should be a closed site in which you don't have to have the same concerns about data privacy, which is why Amy's actually going to be talking about Copilot and how to use it. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Amy. Ready? Awesome.
I am ready. Thank you, Emily. And it's so amazing to literally see people from all over the world on this webinar today. So we're excited to have you here with us. As Emily said, all of the examples I'm going to be using today will be by inputting information into Copilot, since that is what we use here at the University of Iowa. And I am going to be giving you some examples, some actual prompts you can use through the whole job search cycle to help you prepare your resume, cover letters, prepare for the interviews, as well as closing the loop on your search. But before we do that, we want to talk about a tool that is used by many organizations that you've probably heard of called applicant tracking systems, also known as ATS. And simply put, ATS is a software that helps recruiters manage the recruitment and hiring process. So it allows these organizations to collect resumes that are submitted online, to rank candidates based on looking at some keywords, based on the qualifications that have been set out. But keep in mind that not all ATS rank candidates. It can also help organizations to filter out resumes that don't match those required job requirements that are in a job description. It can also help track each candidate's progress through the hiring process. If you've applied for a position recently online, there are systems that will tell you your application has been received, give you updates along the way, and then ultimately tell you if you have been selected for an interview or not. So why does this matter? It matters because you can see some of the stats there. Large corporations, Fortune 500 companies, Many of them are using ATS systems. And the reason for that is because they have a lot of positions to fill, or they are getting numerous applications for even just one position. So it helps them to manage that process. Now, for those smaller or mid-sized companies or organizations, or even nonprofits, only about 20% are using ATS. And oftentimes it's because they don't have the financial resources maybe or someone to manage it, to pay for a system like that. Now, there are a lot of benefits to using ATS, and there are some common misconceptions that we'll talk about in the next slide. All right, so there are 4 listed here. There are probably more that you have heard of, but these were 4 that were identified by JobScan, which is a resource that we use in the College of Business that we will actually talk a little bit more about in a few slides. So some of the common ATS misconceptions are that rejects qualified candidates. It doesn't actually automatically reject anyone. It uses resume parsing, also known as analyzing, and it allows recruiters to filter and then rank applicants based on how well their resumes match the job description. Another myth is that ATS only looks for keywords, and you will hear us talk a lot about keywords today and how important they are. But ATS is designed to, again, look at your entire resume, and it can be a benefit to you because it speeds up that hiring process from the point of contacting you for an interview to then managing any skills assessments that you might be taking in the interview process. Third, this is the one that I think a lot of us have heard, is that you need to trick the system to get an interview, or you need to beat the system. And really, there are no need for tricks at all. Instead, you want to focus on developing the right keywords, that proper resume formatting, and always tailor your resume to the job description. Remember, it's a tool to help streamline the process. It's not something to be beaten. And then finally, ATS and its AI features eliminates the need for human review. These systems, again, are meant to assist hiring managers, but it does not replace that human touch and that human review. Once a resume passes an ATS, there's still a person there that's ultimately deciding who they're going to interview and then progress along in the process. All right, so we're going to do some general tips in optimizing your resume for the ATS, but a little later on in the presentation, we'll talk about more resume tips and best practices to help you be the most successful. First of all, use that simple formatting, nothing fancy. In fact, we even discourage sometimes using italics within your resume because it can not fare well in the ATS systems. Also, stick to those standard fonts, something that can be easily read on a screen and also in a paper format. So Calibri, Arial, Times New Roman. Avoid headers, footers, and tables. And these always seem like a really good idea when you're developing your resume because it helps you to organize it. But they can be a nightmare to then edit down the road if you have to make any changes to those tables. Also use standard section headings, 1 or 2 words, things like work experience, education. Don't get fancy. Don't use things like my professional journey. And again, tailor your resume. You'll hear a couple of these things throughout the presentation repeatedly. Tailor your resume for each job application using keywords, but transparency and honesty is key. It's not a time to make up skills based on the job description that you're seeing. You want to make sure that you're highlighting the skills that you have and how they would complement that position. And then finally, there are tools to help you. We have a couple ATS resources available here in the Tippie College of Business, JobScan and VMOC, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next slide. All right, JobScan. So JobScan is, again, an ATS resource that's available to Tippie graduate students and also Tippie alumni. If you are an undergraduate student, you have a fabulous resource that's available to you too called VMOC that does many of these same things, but also can help you to develop your resume. And if you're interested in learning more about VMOC, you can visit Tippie Undergraduate Career Services in W160 PBB. So again, JobScan helps to tailor your resume for the job you're applying for. You'll upload your resume, upload the job description, and then JobScan will do that magic for you. It will also help you to generate a personalized cover letter that's tailored to that position. And a really cool new tool within the last year is it will help you optimize your LinkedIn profile. As many of you know, as Ellie can attest to, is that employers do look at your LinkedIn profile. So if you can highlight some of those keywords, again, it's just an added plus for you. JobScan also has a couple other cool functions in that it can help you find similar jobs to apply for based on the job descriptions that you have uploaded. And also tracking your search. Super important to keep track of where you have applied to, contact information if you have it, timelines, and also if you have followed up within those positions. If you are interested, if you are a Tippie alumni, we have about 50 accounts available for JobScan. And if you're interested in learning more or signing up for that, you can contact me at the email listed there. And my email will also be in the resource document that will come out after the presentation. Okay, so the fun part is that we are going to show you some powerful AI prompts that you can use, again, throughout the entire job search cycle. Our goals for today are to give you really good concrete examples that get you great results. And we're also going to help you get great at asking AI questions. And we're going to show you how to make prompts more specific, including your professional information. Again, as Emily said, not too much personal information so that it represents who you truly are as a candidate. All right, thanks, Emily. Okay, so to set the stage a little bit for this example is that in the graduate space, we are often career coaching individuals who do have a lot of work experience. And they might be thinking, it's time for me. Maybe I want to get a new job with a different company. I want to pivot. I want to go into a new industry. So they may be in that exploration stage. And in this example, we have someone who might put in a prompt that says, I'm in sales and business development. What top 20 questions should I target for a new job? It's an okay start, but it's not very specific. And with prompts like this, you're going to get a very generic response that's not going to speak to you as a candidate. So how I would tweak that is the second example there is that I would tell AI, what's my current title? In what area? How many years of experience I have? What skills I specialize in, and then that ask of what top 20 companies I should target for a new job. Now, before we go to the next slide, each of these examples will show you the prompts, and then we'll show you a results slide. And for each of these, I literally copied and pasted what you see by that green check mark into Co-Pilot, and everything you see on the results slides are exactly what I got from that. So we'll go ahead and go to the results slide for this one. Now I've only included the top 10 of the 20 that I asked for. So this is a great start. And then maybe I want to look at some more companies in more detail. For example, I'm interested in Salesforce. So I might use then AI to ask some more questions about what the company is about, what services they provide, some general history. But then don't forget about the good old-fashioned website and LinkedIn, where you can do more company research. And we're going to talk about the importance of research again a little later in the presentation. Okay, so now to the meat of the resume and starting to develop what that would look like to help you be one of the best candidates. So some general resume tips and best practices we want to point out. Before you use chat prompts, it's really important for you to understand the basic structure of a resume. We discourage just going out onto the internet and looking for a template because similar to those headers and footers that we talked about earlier, they can sometimes be hard to edit down the road. So we encourage you to look at our Tippie suggested formats, and there are links to those formats in the resource document that, again, you'll get after this presentation. Another big tip is if you are an early professional, say that you are 5 or less years out, we encourage you to have a one-page resume. If you're more experienced, a 2-page resume. We have in our coaching experiences seen candidates have up to 8 pages. And unfortunately, that could get you into the no pile, as I see Ellie affirming that. And so one good way to look at that, it's so hard to let go of all the fabulous experiences that you've had. So look at how you can use that longer resume to tailor your 2-page resume, again, not 8 pages. And we're going to show you how AI can suggest some really concise bullet point phrasing and help you quantify your achievements as well. And Emily already talked about this, and you'll hear it again and again. Don't forget the human touch. You have to be able to describe your skills. You have to be able to describe your why. Why are you the best candidate? Why should they interview you? What skills do you have? And if you rely just on AI, that will be really hard to do. Now, one little housekeeping thing I like to throw out, because we get this a lot of feedback from employers, that they see some really wild and crazy file names for just resumes. So be sure to save that in a first name, last name format and in a PDF format. You want to be known and recognized for your name and who you are, not for some crazy file name. And then lastly, we encourage you, if you are a current student or an alumni, have your resume reviewed by a career coach or a trusted professional to make sure that there are no errors and that, again, you're putting your best foot forward. All right, now we're going to continue to build that resume. And if you are a more seasoned professional that you have, again, just that 2-page resume, you might often have a professional summary or highlight section that's towards the top of your resume, just right under your header. And so with this, I'm going to ask AI to write a professional summary for an X position at X company. Again, a little more details could be included in this so it speaks to who you are. So I'm going to revise this by using part of that first prompt, and then add in the years of experience you have, what you again have specialized in or skills in, and with what company. And then from there, you're going to get a much more detailed response that will speak to you, to who you are as a candidate. So on the results slide for this, I'm going to get actually a very good start to a professional summary. It's going to talk more about what you've accomplished, what you specialize in, what you're committed to. And Emily alluded to this earlier too, is a word of caution. Do not just copy and paste what you see here. You want to make it your own. So you need to make sure that you review it, that you edit it, that you make sure it's accurate, and make sure it's within your language too, because again, sometimes employers can tell just based on common AI language that's used, if you have just put this prompt into AI and you're copying and pasting it. So again, make it your own. All right, now what we all love to do, bullet points. And bullet points can take some time and investment, and AI is a great tool to help you start with that. We generally recommend, if you're an early professional, maybe about 3 to 5 bullet points for each job, experience on your resume. Might be a little more if you're a more seasoned professional. But in this example, I'm going to ask AI to write 5 results-driven statements that you can use for an X position at X company. And I love that that first prompt says results-driven achievement statements. But again, you're going to get a pretty broad response. So we want to give AI a little more detail so it speaks to who you are. So in that second example, oh, thank you. And that second example, again, I'm going to use that first prompt, but then I'm going to add in how many years of experience I have, what areas I've worked in, what company I've worked for, and then again, what you specialize in. So then in the results, we're going to get 5 very good prompts that are a great start to it. So Emily, I'm going to have you go to there you go. Thank you. So here, what's really interesting is that AI actually bolded some of these bullet points, and I did not do that. And so this is just, we're going to touch on maybe why some of those were bolded and what really stands out about making really good bullet points. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, some bullet point tips that you saw again in the previous slide that AI generated for us. Always start your bullet points with a past tense action verb. Even if you're currently in the position, that may seem a little awkward, but that is a best practice for bullet points. You want to make sure too that they are no more than 2 lines so that they're concise and easy to read. Don't put periods at the end. They're not really always formal sentences. And actually, this could be something that could not fare well in the ATS systems. You also want to quantify as much as possible. If you worked with amount of money, how much revenue did you generate? How much money did you save an organization, or how many people did you work with? Also answer those questions about who did your job help? What happened as a result of the job? Did you get to do a large presentation to the entire organization? Did you engage in research? Also, when did it happen and how often or how frequently you did it? And then where did your duties occur? Did it result in maybe you traveling abroad working with international companies, or was it just within your organization? So all great things to include within your bullet points. Cover letters. Okay, I know there's a lot of debate on cover letters, and we're going to talk about whether or not you should do one here in a little bit. But cover letters can be a challenge to write because they take a lot of time. You are asked to customize your cover letter to the job you're applying for. So again, that's where the time comes in, but it could be a great investment to set you apart from other candidates. You can use AI to help you do this to ensure, one, that you're not a victim to those typos and grammatical errors. AI can also help you to find a better way to describe something within your letter. And it can take the hard work out of a cover letter, but you do need to know what to ask it. So we're going to show you an example of how to do that. All right, so I'm going to start with just a general prompt of asking AI to write an interesting and engaging cover letter that is results oriented for this position. And then you would include the job description. So probably not a bad start, but again, it's not going to speak specifically to who you are and communicate that excitement that you have for the position. And so I'm going to get much more specific in that second prompt to talk about how many paragraphs I want within that cover letter. In paragraph 1, showing my enthusiasm, showing that you're the solution, the person, the best candidate for that position. Then also in paragraph 3, I'm going to ask it to share a brief story that is results oriented. We're looking for those outcomes and results. And then in paragraph 4, that call to action, expressing that you are excited and you cannot wait for them to contact you for an interview. Also, don't forget to include the company and also the position that you're applying for. And then lastly, you can, for it to be really specific, include your resume and the job description within the prompt. So here are the results that we got. So again, a great start to a cover letter, but similar to that professional summary, you want to make sure that you review it, that you edit it, that you make sure it's accurate, that it's also within your language, and that everything that was written here, that if you were asked, you could explain your why. You could speak to each of these experiences. So again, it's a tool to be used, but ultimately you need to be the one to review this and make sure it's your best product going forward. All right, some additional cover letter tips and best practices. I know many of you will be sad to hear this, but as a rule of thumb, it is in your best interest to write one. Now, unless there are some systems, for example, Workday, sometimes it doesn't allow you to upload a cover letter, or maybe it might specifically say within a job application, no cover letter needed. If that is not the case, it's in your best interest to write one so it will set you apart from other candidates. Again, you're going to get differing views on this, even from hiring managers and employers, but always just good to be on the cautious side. Also, you might choose to create a solid base or format of a cover letter and then tailor it each time to the job that you're applying for. Do not forget to change the company name, for example. Don't forget to change some of those skills. You're going to highlight the relevant skills that you have and experiences based on the job description that you're applying for. Also, put it in a good cover letter template. So we recommend using the same header as your resume. What you have at the top there with your contact information, use that so it's consistent, so that if someone has your two documents side by side, they can see they both belong to you. Keep it really concise, down to one page. And then again, showing that enthusiasm with a professional tone. And here's another little AI tip for that bullet point there, is that once you have a letter written, you can then put it into AI and say, does this letter show enthusiasm with a professional tone? And then it will give you feedback on if that's the case or not with some suggestions. Always end with that call to action, and then also proofread it. Have your documents reviewed by a career coach or, again, a trusted professional in your area. Okay, so now you have developed your resume, cover letter, and you have an interview. You have been selected. And so we want to give you some examples of some powerful interview prompts you can use. And that very first one is just a very general prompt. I have a job interview. What questions should I prepare for? Within that prompt, you're going to get very general questions, probably a lot behavioral based. Not a bad start, but you can get more specific to the job that you're applying for or that you're going to be interviewing for. So in the second example, I might include, what are the most common interview questions I should be prepared to answer for X position at X company, and then include that job description. For some larger organizations, sometimes the internet is familiar with some of the questions that are asked. So you might find those on there, but with caution, those can change pretty rapidly. So again, it's a good starting point. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you go into an interview with questions to ask the employer. You never want to say no when they ask you if you have any questions for them. So AI can also generate questions you could ask in the interview, and we'll go ahead and go over to the next slide where I can show you what was generated from that third prompt. So here again, this individual is interviewing for a position at Collins Aerospace as a data analyst. It will give you a variety of questions based on not only day-to-day responsibilities, but maybe how the team functions, what metrics or KPI are involved, and then maybe just their approach to innovation. So again, always going with questions to the interview. All right, some additional interviewing resources that are available to University of Iowa students overall, as well as alumni. We have Big Interview, which is a virtual interviewing tool where you get to record yourself and then you get feedback. And from that feedback, the system will then recommend some tutorials to help you to strengthen your skills. And don't forget about those good old-fashioned mock interviews. Nothing replaces that face-to-face interaction. And we have a variety of them that are offered by the Pomerantz Career Center for all University of Iowa students, and also through undergraduate and graduate career services here in Tippie. Okay, now we're closing the loop on the interview process. So you have had a wonderful interview and you want to send a thank you. Another piece of advice, always send a thank you. About 20 to 25% of employers say that they only get thank yous from about 20 to 25% of applicants. That is not very high at all. I can't remember if it was Emily or Ellie that said, employers usually don't remember what was written in a thank you, but they remember that you sent one. Handwritten is an added bonus, but it's totally okay to do an email thank you within about 24 hours after you have done the interview. So for a really great thank you note, I'm going to use that second prompt where you are talking about what position you applied for, where, and also I think a really good tip is maybe include something in there that you had talked about during the interview with the employer. That's going to be a nice touch added to that thank you note. So going to the results here. So again, a great start. You've heard me say it before, don't just copy and paste this and put it into an email. You want to make sure to review it, edit it, make it your language, make it your own, and make sure the information in there is accurate. Okay, so some more impactful prompts. I'm going to go over these kind of quickly just to make sure we have enough time for Ellie at the end here, but you can use AI for all three of these areas. One I'm going to really touch on is company research. In one of those first examples, we talked about using AI as a way to just gain more information about organizations. but don't forget to do the research for when you're preparing for interviews. We get a lot of feedback from employers too that we have wonderful University of Iowa students, but sometimes they're not always doing that research that they need to for the interview process. So be sure to do that. On the other two, salary negotiations and networking, again, you can use AI for that. But don't forget, if you are a current student, come in and see your career services and your career coaches, and they can help you out in those areas too. All right, so now we're wrapping up this portion. Some of these tips, again, you've heard, I'll go over them kind of quickly, but don't use AI to exaggerate your strengths or create any false narratives. You have to be able to explain your why to employers. And if you let AI do all the work for you, you could really risk taking your personality out of everything, and then it could cost you a job. Always remember, AI helps to prepare and may help you to get that interview, but it's going to be you and your authenticity that ultimately wins the interviews and the offers. And at the end of the day, there's really no machine that can replace the creativity, critical thinking, and personal touch that goes into preparing for a job search. All right, so wrapping up here, we already talked about that first point, the over-reliance on AI. Just don't, again, it's a tool, but don't rely on it completely. Emily also touched on this too about the accuracy and the biases, is that you want to make sure that it's accurate to who you are. Also with AI, it only knows what we tell it. And so that's one thing to consider. And also it can be lagging a little bit behind in some of the data that it has. So that's why it's always good to review it for the accuracy and biases. And then finally, the confidentiality piece, as Emily said, be sure not to include any personal information and also about yourself or others in those AI prompts. All right, so that's a lot of information. And again, you'll be getting these slides and all the resources afterwards, but I'm going to turn over to Ellie now to talk about the use of AI in terms of recruitment.
Thank you, Amy. Amy and Emily, what great information and resources you all covered today. There's just a lot out there. Again, you could have so many webinars on this topic. So I'm going to kind of switch to it being used in the industry and how you can use it for your career success, really building off of things that Emily and Amy have spoke about so far. So I am in the insurance industry, but each industry is looking at AI, mainly how to drive productivity and new concepts into ways we're all doing things, whether that's from healthcare industry to manufacturing, we're all analyzing it. I would say the biggest thing for us specifically are these bullets listed here. But something I want to note is that we are not looking at AI replacing jobs. I would say a lot of industries are talking about how we can upskill our employees to be using AI to drive productivity and to overall, make new ways into what we're currently doing. So a big thing on that right now is we're building out AI training for internal staff. We've mentioned legality reasons, and also just best practices. When should you be using what software system? And then, AI chatbots specific to our organization. How can that be leveraged in order to build an experience, whether it's internally for an employee or externally for a client? Another big one is generating and translating videos. Rather than having to hire this out, how can we use AI internally to do that for us? Analyzing large amount of data. This is an awesome one. Co-Pilot is great for this. You can literally put, 4 or 5 different documents, Excel spreadsheets next to each other, and it can analyze the trends, like Emily mentioned. And then, creating and crafting responses to common questions versus us having to go out and do that. Really pushing us to think about, how can we get more productive in our day-to-day is really the big thing. And again, it's to upskill employees, not to replace jobs at the end of the day. So AI in your career search, we specifically do not use an ATS system. I do look at every single resume. I believe in the human touch. I think, Emily said at one point that might be the way we go, and the human touch may not be the way in the future. But right now, I believe in it. Our company believes in it. However, you can tell when someone's used AI. Specifically, if they do get to an interview, it's very, very clear. So I'm just going to kind of build off of everything that Amy and Emily has said in that regard. So, AI has been around for a long time, whether you've recognized it or not. So it's in LinkedIn, it's in Indeed. This is a good example of how you build your profile. I'm sure Amy has said this from the rooftops. You build your profile, LinkedIn, Handshake, Indeed. It is AI on the back end. It is analyzing the trends based off of your profile and then populating the jobs that you want to see. So make sure that your skills are in there and updated, reflected correctly. A big thing, AI can also do skill gaps for you. So you can put your resume in there and the job description, you can match it up in AI and it will be like, hey, go take this LinkedIn course, or you can go get this certification to make you stand out. It really helps fill gaps within your career search and to just kind of upskill yourself, essentially. Forecasting. This is one of my favorites. I love workforce data, so I am a nerd in this regard, but it can help you track which industries or roles are growing within certain sectors. Obviously, job security is a big thing for everyone. So look for industries that are growing or positions that are growing, for an overall great career path for yourself. Set yourself up for success. And build a brand. Amy mentioned we go out and look at your LinkedIn profile. I honestly look at Facebook as well, because how you represent yourself externally is a huge reflection of how you're going to walk into our company. And there are so many tools out there now, Hootsuite, Canva, that help you really create a cohesive brand in a visual way without doing a lot of lift. AI in the interview process. Oh, this is one of my favorites. When we got together and talked about what is going to be the content in this, I nerded out about this because, again, AI can set you apart from other candidates, other resumes, cover letters, etc. It ultimately helps you perform at your peak and appear more confident and prepared. However, when you get into the interview, sometimes that can get lost because you might be copying and pasting things. And so use AI to help craft your why. Start there. That's always what I like to tell candidates. I kind of seen it all in regards to recruiting, and two of my favorite examples, how people could have leveraged AI in their interview process. One of them was an entry-level candidate and one of them was a seasoned candidate. And the entry-level candidate, he had an internship, and I was like, what's your why for transitioning into this role? And quite frankly, it was an account executive role. And so, there probably needed to be a little bit more skills that he needed to learn on the job. So he wasn't as qualified as he should have been. But his why was, during my internship, I was working with several older teammates and am ready to be in an executive level role. And I think, that's a fine why, but you can frame it better. And so, if he used AI, I literally put that prompt into ChatGPT and it popped out. My motivation for this role stems from my internship experience, where I worked alongside several more experienced teammates, and this exposure has prepared me to take on an executive role. How much better does that sound? Welcoming, approachable, kind, human, 10 times better than, the initial why. So help you, frame it, build on it. I always like to tell people AI is a great starting point. You can ask it questions to help narrow you down further. I also had a seasoned candidate. Unfortunately, her company got bought out and she got laid off. And so I asked her why, and she just said she needed a job. And she was way overqualified for what she applied for. But her skills and talents definitely could have been utilized in this role and beyond in our organization. And so, if she could have narrowed it down a little bit further, and when I put that into AI, what it popped out for me was, as a seasoned candidate, my motivation stems from the company being acquired, which has led me to seek new opportunities to leverage my experience and continue my career growth. I would have been like, heck yeah. She had been working there for 20 years. She didn't even realize how many skills she had that she could be bringing to this job. And, all of the tools and resources that Amy and Emily have said before, she could have prepared herself a little bit better through the process to exemplify all of those amazing skills she had. So again, just to reiterate, review your resume and cover letter. That is huge. And, analyze it against the job description. Gather content. The worst thing is when you ask a candidate, like, what do you know about our organization? And they hadn't researched it. AI can generate maybe your top 5 employers that you're looking at for jobs. They can analyze all of that content for you, and then you can go back into ChatGPT or whatever it may be, and then build off of that. Come prepared with that content. Crafting answers. That is a big one. It not only will help you craft questions, but answers. I think we miss that other end of it. Obviously make it sound like you, but it can really tie a bow on a question that you might have been prepared for. But AI really wraps it up. And then Amy said, good old-fashioned mock interviews are amazing, but AI also offers opportunities for, simulating that real-time interview experience and getting the feedback. So I think at the end of the day, in our recruiting practices, we are using AI in ways to help us leverage the right fit candidate. However, it is not our sole relier on figuring out which candidate is the right one for our organization, because truly we're huge believers in culture. And at the end of the day, when we get on a call with someone, understand their why, their passions, their career pathing, their vision, that is going to be the big driver for if they're a fit in our organization or not. So I'll pass the mic back over, but just wanted to tie a bow on kind of all of the great resources that have been mentioned so far.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ellie, for sharing your perspective, from what you're doing there. And now it is question time. I do have several questions that have come through. One of the first ones I want to get to, actually, someone messaged Emily directly, and they were asking about if companies will give the option to actually opt out of AI for a resume review. And so, Emily, would you mind taking on that one?
Yeah, so organizations may allow it. And you had asked specifically, I think this was Eric, you asked, is it legal to not offer it? Yes, except in the state of Illinois, where you have the Video Interview Act of 2021, maybe. And so that one actually does say if you're in Illinois or based in Illinois, I don't know the specifics. I'm not an employment lawyer, but I do know that means you must allow for opt-out. But let's think through that process. I'm sorry, my camera is not always doing what it's supposed to do. Whatever, I'm blurry. Who cares? If we think through that process, what that typically means is your resume maybe goes back in the pile. These create efficiencies for organizations. It's not intended to be adversarial or a test of whether or not you're willing to use, technology. It's to create efficiencies. That's so much of what it is. So those that do allow for an opt-out, that's generous of them. I would not, and this is going to sound a little bit jaded, if it's a large organization that has tons of applicants, I don't know what their motivation is to go out of their way to interview you when everyone else is going through the process. It's not meant as a criticism to you at all. I remember when HireVue started, my undergrads were like, I hate this. And I was like, cool, candidate experience matters. This is a problem for organizations to tackle. And if they're requiring this and good candidates aren't then applying because it's required, that's a loss for them. right? And so it's really, unfortunately for some, it means, yeah, you might not get looked at. Organizations are allowed to differ in these things, but legally most states don't require it. But Illinois does allow for that opt-out.
Excellent. Thanks, Emily, for
It's
clarifying
a great
that.
question. Yeah.
Either one of you can answer this, but maybe back to Amy. I have several questions just asking about resume formats and if it's preferred to have a PDF format over like a Word format. Can you maybe speak to that and readdress that for us real quick?
Sure. Always we say again, err on the side of caution. Save it as a PDF just in case within. If it's again like Ellie's point, they don't use an ATS system, so it's probably being sent to someone's inbox, for example, or some other system. So by saving it as a PDF, that will ensure that maybe nothing gets messed up formatting wise along the way. So again, you might have some different views on that, but again, always err on the side of caution. PDF is our recommendation for the way to go.
Super, thank you. And then kind of along similar lines that I've heard throughout this discussion, one of our guests is writing that they have some employees who are clearly using AI to respond to some emails. Do you have any coaching tips on how you could coach employees around personalizing their message, or how do you have those hard conversations about, hey, I know you're using AI, but I need you to reduce, and personalize your message? Do you guys have any suggestions there?
Yeah, I'll start, but I'd be really interested in what you guys have to say. So I mostly deal with undergrads. And I often find that I need to explain to draw the language from Ellie and Amy. Like, you have to have your why. When you're asking your employee to do something different from what they want to do or how they're used to doing something, you have to explain why to them. And it can't just be because I said, you're not their parent. They're their colleague. You've got to say, this is the reason why. The reason why is because it sounds inauthentic. It doesn't allow us to demonstrate our culture. It doesn't allow us to facilitate a culture, of communication and openness that we want, right? So you've got to be able to communicate that. I would start by asking why they're relying on it so heavily. That's probably a good place to start. You tend to find they're busy, tired, feel overworked, so it quickens it. But helping them understand what they're losing in that process. Not that all workers are 21-year-olds, but in a real way, aren't we? Aren't we maybe still always about 20 years old? And so just explaining it to them in that way, and it might sound naive to say, well, explain it to them. I mean, that's the best you can do. And helping them understand why it's creating friction for you in the team. You might also ask yourself why it's creating friction for you, but that's beyond my expertise. Ellie, Amy, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
Agree with everything that you said, actually. I was looking at the chat. I know that we're out of time here. So Adam, just curious if there's a way that someone has a question and we can follow up with them. Certainly email us if you have additional questions. We'd love to connect with you and answer those.
Awesome.
Yeah, can I reiterate that? Because there were a couple questions where I was like, we'll answer at the end, and now we aren't. Please email me because I have answers for all of your questions. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, and I do want to say a big thank you to Emily, Amy, and Ellie for today's excellent presentation. Bravo on a job well done. It was obviously a wonderful conversation, and I know we all deeply appreciate your insights. Just a reminder to our viewers, this webinar has been recorded and will be available on the Tippie College Alumni Resources page and on our YouTube channel. In addition to the recording, we will have resource documents available for further AI exploration. Right after the webinar, once you close out, a brief survey will appear in your browser. We would greatly appreciate it if you take a moment to share your feedback to help us enhance our future webinar programs. On behalf of the Tippie College of Business, I want to again thank our guests, and I want to thank all of you as viewers. Thank you for joining us all today. And as always, go Hawks.